Hi, folks. Welcome back. I'm Dennis Vitoza, also known as F Noodles, and today we're going to be talking about the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's latest movie. Is it really a disaster? I don't know. We're about to find out exactly how its opening weekend numbers are shaping up in just a few days. Now, that being said, there is something else we should be discussing, something that yours truly has actually experienced firsthand. There has been a tremendous amount of criticism surrounding the Odyssey, the rollout of the movie, the casting decisions, and everything else that has come with it. The film reportedly cost around $250 million to make, with another roughly $250 million spent on marketing. That means the movie pretty much has to make close to $1 billion in order to break even. Needless to say, as of the recording of this video on Sunday, it's doing relatively well at the box office. It's not there yet at the $1 billion mark, but things could certainly change. The reviews have also been incredibly divided depending on which side of the internet you're looking at. The movie is either terrific with glowing reviews across the board, or it's complete garbage and you shouldn't bother watching it. Now, what's interesting is that this isn't even purely political anymore. There are people on the left who are also frustrated with the way Nolan adapted the story, and we actually started looking at some of those criticisms in the last video I made covering this movie. Now, that being said, there's something else that the NBC Universal production overlords have apparently been doing over the last few days. And as I mentioned earlier, yours truly has experienced it firsthand. This is what actually has been covered by the Not the Bee, which, despite the name, is not the Babylon Bee. The Not the Bee covers real stories. It's not satire like the Babylon Bee. Now, according to Not the Bee's reporting, there are allegations that the studio has been issuing takedown requests against content that's critical of or simply mocking the Odyssey in anticipation of the movie's release. Now, yours truly actually experienced this over the last few days. I received 2 strikes on TikTok and 1 IP claim, meaning my account is now dangerously close to being removed entirely from the platform just 1 week after I finally got back on TikTok following an entire year of being banned. Yes, yours truly is back on TikTok, and apparently it hasn't been going very well. I seem to be getting targeted by NBC Universal, but I'm apparently far from being the only person, because Oilfield Rando on X, as well as several other creators who have been making AI parody videos about the Odyssey, have also been getting hit with DMCA claims. That was exactly one of the things, which is exactly what happened to me. Now, I received an IP claim relating to a parody I posted that was based on the trailer. It wasn't even actually footage from inside of the movie theater, which, by the way, you can already find circulating all over the internet and on X right now. Instead, I was reacting to and commenting on an AI parody, which is exactly the sort of thing that typically falls under fair use. Nevertheless, I received an IP claim on TikTok. I appealed it, and the appeal was rejected. They didn't provide any meaningful explanation as to why the appeal was rejected. It simply was. Needless to say, I'm apparently not the only person getting hit with these sorts of copyright claims from NBC. According to Oilfield Rando, who shared copies of the complaints that creators have been receiving, the disputes appear to be coming from John Blaha, an analyst based in California, filing these claims through content protection at NBCUni.com. In fact, you can actually see multiple posts that were hit with copyright complaints as a result. Needless to say, this certainly looks like a desperate attempt to hold the narrative together. We all know what happens when enough negative reactions and reviews begin circulating around a movie. People lose interest, which is understandable when Hollywood has spent years serving audiences what would amount to be basically hot garbage. Now, despite all of that, this movie still seems as though it's going to perform relatively well, especially considering the arguments people are making about the IMAX screenings. One of the most common responses I've seen is people saying, no, this movie is incredible because I'm going to have to wait until the end of August just to get tickets. Then they'll post a screenshot as proof. What they usually leave out is that those screenshots are almost always showing the rare 70mm IMAX format, which is only being shown on roughly 25 screens around the entire country. The movie itself is playing on approximately 4,000 theaters nationwide. So needless to say, you can absolutely find a theater to go watch it if you want to. In fact, just yesterday, I was sharing screenshots showing that I could still get tickets here in Los Angeles less than 2 hours before the start of the screening, even in the rare 70mm format. So it's not as though it's impossible to see the movie. Maybe it's a little more difficult if you're specifically trying to watch it in that rare 70mm IMAX format and you don't live near one of those theaters. But it's certainly doable. People clearly want to see this movie, and I guess it is what it is. They get to do whatever they want to do with those 3 hours of their lives. Now, another major topic of conversation has been the allegations that Rotten Tomatoes is manipulating the ratings for the Odyssey. Now, this conversation started a few days ago when there was a lot of pushback online over the movie. A screenshot of the Rotten Tomatoes page started circulating that showed a 96% tomato meter score. A lot of people misunderstood what that score actually represents. So let's clarify that for a second. The tomato meter is not an average review score. It represents the percentage of approved critics who gave the movie a positive review, not the average numerical rating they gave it. Now, what that means is a movie receives a fresh rating represented by the red tomato if 60% or more of approved critics give it a positive review. It receives a rotten rating represented by the green splat if 59% or fewer of those critics give it a positive review. Now, to earn the certified fresh badge, a movie must maintain a score of at least 75% positive reviews while also meeting a minimum review threshold, including reviews from at least top 5 critics. Now, that's an important distinction because it doesn't mean that these people are giving it a 75 out of 100. It means that at least 75% of approved critics reviewed the movie positively. Now, for additional clarification, if a critic writes a review using a numerical score, Rotten Tomatoes converts it into either a positive or negative review using general thresholds. On a 5-star scale, 3 out of 5 stars or higher counts as positive. On a 4-star scale, 2.5 stars or higher counts as positive. On a 10-point scale, 6 out of 10 is considered a positive review. In other words, a movie can get a D+, and that can qualify as a good positive rating. See what I mean? Anyway, when you actually go through many of the reviews for the Odyssey, a lot of them average out just over that threshold. All of that being said, people have been passing around the tomato meter score as though it's some kind of objective validation that the movie is great. Obviously, if you want to base your opinion on what professional critics have to say, that's entirely up to you. Personally, critics have gotten plenty of movies terribly wrong before, and many films they've praised have ended up being complete disappointments. I mean, just think of every Marvel movie that the critics love. They all suck. Now, to be fair, though, it does seem as though audiences generally like the movie. A lot of the audience reviews have been remarkably positive. At the same time, there are also plenty of negative audience reviews, which brings us to the next controversy. Now, what a lot of people have been pointing to is a post that went viral yesterday from an account named Emerald Apple on X. They wrote, the audience scores on the Odyssey and Rotten Tomatoes is once again manipulating the ratings as they are currently blocking negative scores. Metacritic is showing a more accurate picture of the real rating for the movie, rated at a 5.7 average. Other movies, such as The Woman King, also boast a massively high viewer score of 99%, despite its viewer score on Metacritic being only 3.2%. Now, to be absolutely fair, that Metacritic rating has actually fallen since they made that post. It has dropped from a 5.7 down to around 5. The majority of the user reviews are either strongly positive or strongly negative, and with only a handful of mixed reviews in between. Some of the negative reviews describe the movie as a mockery of all Europeans and their history, calling it woke DEI crap with poor casting choices. Another review says, forgetting the fact that this film is being universally praised almost exclusively by ideologically bankrupt critics, is still remarkably mediocre. One reviewer referred to what they called the wooden horse in the room, arguing that a black woman playing the Helen of Troy was impossible to ignore. Another simply wrote 172 minutes of IMAX that felt like 6 hours. Yet another said, unfortunately, magnificent visuals cannot save a fundamentally hollow and offensive script. That said, I've also seen a number of people online, many of whom who claim to be experts in Greek literature, argue that Nolan's adaptation strips away a lot of the original themes and philosophical depth of Homer's epic in favor of nonstop action. According to those critics, much of the complexity of the original story has been sacrificed to keep the movie moving at an almost relentless pace from beginning to end. Honestly, that wouldn't surprise me. That's generally how Christopher Nolan structures his movies. If you look back at films like The Dark Knight, they're constantly moving. There's very little downtime because the pacing rarely lets up. So if that's what you're into, then guess what? Go ahead. Now, another interesting aspect of this entire conversation has been who's actually promoting this movie. People notice that Fox News gave The Odyssey an overwhelmingly positive review. In fact, they shared the review on their Facebook page with the headline, "Review, Ignore the Woke Rumors. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is a must-see." The post goes on to say, our reviewer says that with Matt Damon as Odysseus leading an all-star cast in this epic retelling of the Greek War, the movie has become the subject of criticism online over some of its casting choices and questions of historical accuracy. Odyssey. It goes on to say Fox's Joseph Wolfson says to ignore the blather and go see this epic tale, the first feature film ever shot entirely on IMAX film. Now, what's interesting is that Fox also appears to be criticizing the movie from another angle. Around the same time, they published another article with the headline, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is one of the most subversive adaptations in Hollywood history, where they argue that the movie fundamentally undermines Homer's original epic. So, Fox News, you might want to pick a lane. Look, at the end of the day, though, it's pretty obvious there's a significant effort to get people into theaters to see this movie. Obviously, I could sit here and speculate all day about why that is. Personally, I think every so often, Hollywood likes to dust off the old pagan myths and repackage them for modern audiences, especially at a time when Christianity appears to be regaining ground and influence in parts of Western culture. Now, that's just simply how I see it. Personally, I'm not planning on watching this movie. Maybe I'll watch it someday. I don't know. I've read The Odyssey enough times already. I read it in middle school, high school, studied it in college literature classes. And if I'm remembering accurately, we even performed some scenes of it in theater classes in the middle of all that. Now, it's an old epic. It's an important work of literature. It's an interesting story, but I don't think we need to keep reviving these ancient epics only to reshape them into modern neoliberal propaganda. This serves whatever contemporary message Hollywood wants to push. In this particular case, the message seems to be that anyone can be anything. Historical authenticity doesn't really matter, and diversity is our greatest strength. Personally, I don't think most Americans actually agree with that message at all. Now, can it still be an entertaining movie? Absolutely. If it's done well, The Odyssey can make for a fantastic story. Can this movie still make money? Sure, why not? I wouldn't be surprised at all. The reality is that we've had a pretty disappointing summer for movies so far. We're already well into the summer at this point, and there really haven't been many standout releases. Everything about Moana and Supergirl ended up being just a disappointment in one way or another. So now we have The Odyssey, and I think a lot of Americans simply want a reason to get out of the house, go to the theater and watch something. They'll put up with movies they don't necessarily think are great simply because there really hasn't been anything worth watching so far. Anyway, all that being said, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Do you think The Odyssey deserves all the praise it's getting? Do you think the criticism is justified? Have you seen it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who may find it useful. Anyway, folks, I hope you have a terrific day. Take care. Peace.